This video is for an associate dentist working at My Dentist, knowing whether they should agree to the terms that have been imposed on a new associate agreement that starts on the 1st of December. My understanding is that unless you specifically opt out, you by default agree to these new terms. Now, I've read the, I'm just going to read off these documents here, the busting myths about new license agreements, the license assessment summary, the frequently asked questions, the table of changes, and the BDA advice to associates on these documents. So there was quite a bit of reading to go through there. My conclusion is that the contract, or the changes to the associate contract, do clarify a number of concerns or key points about being a self-employed associate. So when you are self-employed, the key thing is that you are not under the control of an external agent like My Dentist. So what the new contract does is it writes in terms that show there's less control, and by that there's changes to access to premises, working patterns, holiday arrangements, freedom to use any laboratory, although there is a restriction on what My Dentist will contribute towards laboratories, free to use your own equipment, clinical staff, how you work with them, they're under the control of My Dentist and you report to the practice manager rather than take up any issues with the clinical staff, and also quite a lot of improvements to the use of locums, which means that if you are sick, you can't work, it is your expense to provide a replacement. All of those changes are really positive to assuring that you qualify as a self-employed individual rather than an employed individual. Now, I'm just going to talk about the tax position rather than the intricacies of other points of the agreement. And for me, the key point is in clause 17, and I'll just have a read of this here. So clause 17, what it actually does is it says to the associate, if HMRC look at our relationship, working relationship with you, and they establish that you are not operating as a self-employed dentist, you're actually an employed dentist under the control of My Dentist, what it does is it says if any extra taxes arise, income tax, national insurance, and they are forced onto My Dentist, because remember, it is their responsibility to assess whether the associates working for them are self-employed or employed. Now, if this test fails and employment status comes back, the tax liabilities fall on My Dentist. Now, My Dentist under clause 17, what that does is it passes those liabilities onto the associate. So My Dentist have already indemnified themselves against those extra costs, and actually the BDA refer to this in their report, where they said it's standard practice by corporates to defer or reduce any liabilities that may arise. Now, the big change in the clause 17 is that it is extended to include any liability, deduction, contribution, assessment or claim and reasonable costs and expenses made in connection with services where the recovery is not prohibited by law. So under the new working arrangement, they've actually extended that a little bit further to allow them to recover costs or reasonable costs. That wasn't in there before. So if anything, the extension of clause 17 actually extends their recovery of taxes and social security to allow them to recover costs as well, reasonable costs. So a slightly worse position. An important change to remember is, traditionally, if you're an associate working under an associate agreement that has been approved by the BDA, so it comes from their template, HMRC say if you are working under that template, we won't investigate, we will work on the basis that you are self-employed, no questions asked. Now, HMRC have said from the 6th of April 2023 that they will remove that agreement because what they feel is that people are using the template to gain self-employment status, but the reality of the working patterns around their relationship with the practices doesn't mirror what is in the contracts or the templates. So what is happening from the 6th of April 2023 is HMRC will no longer rely on what is written in your associate contract. They will look at it on what is actually happening. Now, that's going to be different for every associate. They're going to have a different relationship. Now, there is a tool called CEST, or the ESI, Employment Status Indicator. Now, this is a series of questions. It's on the HMRC website. I'll share it in the link in the video below, where you go through and ask yourself a series of questions about your engagement with the practice you work at. Now, it could be that you have different practices you work at. It could be at two different practices, two different engagements. So you would need to do the questions for both practices you work at. Now, that, when you get to the end of that assessment, it should tell you whether you are employed, self-employed, or it can't answer. Now, if you're self-employed, that's absolutely fine. You take the report, put it on a file, and if ever you were to be investigated about your relationship at work, you could say, I've used the employment status indicator and it's come back that I'm self-employed. And HMRC should mirror that or agree to that status, provided you've answered the questions correctly. If the employment status shows you as being employed, you have a problem there and you need to speak to your practice to say, look, I've answered these questions, it gives me the employment status. We need to come up with an arrangement to make sure that my working conditions reflect self-employment status. So I and myself and you as a practice can ensure that if HMRC do come and looking at our working relationships, nobody is going to get assessed for any extra taxes or national insurance. So, in summary, the new associate agreement, yes, I do agree, it does make the associates' working arrangements more like a self-employment status, so it does strengthen that. However, we need to be aware that from 2023, it's not what's going to be written in your agreement is how HMRC are going to look at these relationships. It's the practicality, the reality of how you are actually working that is going to determine whether you fall within the employment or self-employment rules. And the other thing to remember is, even though HMRC say on their website currently till 5th of April 2023, we will honour any BDA template that has been used for the associate agreement, whilst the My Dentist agreement has been prepared with the BDA in mind, it certainly doesn't say, or the BDA don't confirm, that it's based on the BDA template, but it doesn't seem to be the BDA template. Now, I may not have got that actually correct, but I'm pretty sure I have, that I don't think the My Dentist are using the default template that the BDA have produced as a guide for associates to use, that will then get them this exemption from employment status should they find themselves under a HMRC investigation. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to my channel. If there's anything else you want to know, ideas for different videos, please leave them in the comments below. I'll read them and see what I can produce in the future.